3 days ago, I walked into what I believed was my own home, only to be hit with a scene straight out of a nightmare. My husband Jeff was cozied up with my childhood best friend Grace, and to top it off, she's pregnant. With his baby. As if that betrayal wasn't enough, they somehow thought I'd just keep wiring money from Europe to support both of them while they played house behind my back. To make sense of all this, I need to lay out some background, because none of this is remotely normal. Jeff was diagnosed with a rare form of cystic fibrosis when he turned 24, about 2 years into our marriage. The treatments he needed weren't covered by our insurance. They were labeled experimental and not medically necessary, so every claim we submitted got denied. We fought it, appealed multiple times, but lost every time. The attorneys we spoke with were blunt: without FDA approval, there was virtually no path to sue. We were drowning in medical bills. Just the medications alone were around $4,000 a month, and that didn't even include the endless doctor visits, lab work, or monitoring tests he had to go through every few weeks. Our savings were gone. Bankruptcy was on the horizon when I got a job offer from a global consulting firm. It would pay nearly 3 times what I made locally, but I'd have to move to Munich and be based there for at least 2 years, maybe longer depending on how the project evolved. Jeff and I talked about it for days. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only real chance we had to afford his treatments and keep him alive. So I took the job and began sending home nearly 40% of my paycheck every month to cover his medical needs and help him live somewhat comfortably. The long-term plan was for me to stay in Germany until we had enough saved up either to switch to a better insurance policy or until his treatments became mainstream enough to be covered. Since Jeff couldn't work full-time due to his health and still needed daily help with everything from appointments to basic tasks, Grace offered to move in and help out while I was gone. Grace and I had been best friends since we were 8. I trusted her completely. She had always supported us through Jeff's diagnosis, helping research new treatments, driving him to doctor visits when I was picking up extra shifts before I left the country. So her stepping in felt like a blessing. Jeff would be taken care of by someone who cared, Grace would get a place to stay since her lease was ending and she was unemployed, and I could focus on working overseas without constantly worrying. We kept in touch every day. Jeff always looked well on our video calls, and Grace regularly updated me on his treatment schedule and health. Everything seemed stable. I even planned a surprise for Jeff. His birthday was coming up, and I managed to get time off to fly home early without telling either of them. I unlocked the front door with my own key, expecting a happy reunion, and instead, I found them curled up on the couch watching a movie. Grace was visibly pregnant. Not just a little, either. She was definitely showing. The first words out of Jeff's mouth? "This isn't what it looks like." Yeah, right. They were literally holding hands and she had a baby bump. When I demanded answers, Grace started sobbing. She admitted they'd caught feelings for each other about 4 months ago. Then she dropped the bomb: she was already 5 months pregnant. Jeff tried to calm the situation by saying they had planned to tell me, but wanted to wait until I was back for good so it wouldn't disrupt my job. Apparently, they'd been having serious talks about how to make things work, and the genius solution they came up with was for me to keep working in Munich and sending money home so they could raise the baby. Grace had the audacity to say I should be more understanding because she gave up her life to take care of Jeff while I was off living in Europe. She said it was only natural for them to grow close, given how much time they were spending together. She even tried to frame herself as the victim, saying I should be grateful for all she'd done for our family instead of getting angry. Then Jeff chimed in with the wildest suggestion yet: he didn't think we needed to divorce right away. It would be easier, he claimed, if I stayed legally married to him so he could remain on my health insurance while they figured things out. He explained that since Grace didn't have a job or insurance, the best course of action for them was for me to continue footing the bill. At least until the baby was born and they had a better plan. I told them both they were completely delusional if they thought I'd bankrolled their little love nest while they lived in my house, used my money, and acted like I was just some side character in their new family life. Jeff got defensive fast, saying I was being heartless and putting his life in danger by cutting him off. Grace doubled down, claiming that ending their relationship or withdrawing financial support would be the same as sentencing Jeff to death because they couldn't afford his medication without me. I left immediately and checked into a hotel. Right now, I'm figuring out my next move. Divorce is coming, no question about it. And I'm going to fight hard if Jeff tries to come after me for alimony. I'm also looking into whether I can recover any of the money I poured into our joint accounts and household expenses during the 1.5 years I was working abroad. What eats me up the most is realizing this whole thing was planned. They were just waiting to break the news until they could guilt me into continuing to fund their life. Grace even had the nerve to say I should be happy for them, that they found love during a hard time. As if I should throw them a damn baby shower. I know people might say I should have seen it coming, or that long distance never works. But I trusted them. I truly believed we were all on the same team, fighting to keep Jeff alive so I could come home. Never in my worst nightmare did I think they'd betray me like this, and still expect me to keep the checks coming. Now, I'm just trying to keep my head straight, take legal action where I can, and figure out how to move forward without letting this break me. There's no doubt in my mind I'm getting a divorce. And chances are, I'll have to resign from my job in Munich and move back to the US for good just to deal with the mess Jeff and Grace left behind. Honestly, I still can't wrap my head around the fact that the two people I trusted more than anyone could do this to me, and then try to paint me as the bad guy for refusing to bankroll their relationship. Update 1. It's been a week since I walked into that nightmare, and I've actually made a lot of headway getting my life back in order. I've checked out of the hotel and moved in with my parents while I search for a good divorce attorney and figure out what comes next. So far, I found 3 lawyers who specialize in divorces that involve spousal support and major medical expenses. I'm meeting with all of them this week to decide who I feel most confident working with. From my early consultations, it looks like I have a solid case to avoid paying Jeff any alimony. Between the affair and the fact that I was the sole breadwinner while he was cheating, my position is strong. The lawyers also believe I might be able to reclaim some of the money I sent back home, especially the funds that went into our shared savings and house projects. Thankfully, I kept thorough records of every bank transfer and expense I covered while I was overseas. On top of that, I've started the process of taking Jeff off my health insurance. It'll officially go into effect at the end of this month. When I called the insurance company and explained that I was filing for divorce due to infidelity, they assured me that as soon as the paperwork is submitted, I can drop him from my plan. Jeff has been trying to call me over and over, but I haven't picked up once. I blocked both him and Grace on every platform. I have no interest in hearing their excuses. My parents, on the other hand, have been incredible. They're letting me stay with them as long as I need and even offered to help with legal costs, although I think I'll be able to cover everything myself thanks to the savings I built while working abroad. Surprisingly, the situation with my job in Munich worked out better than I expected. When I told my supervisor what was happening, she said the company had actually been looking to grow their domestic presence anyway. So they offered to transfer me to the Chicago office. I'll be taking a bit of a pay cut and losing a few benefits, but at least I won't have to search for a new job while dealing with all the legal chaos. Looking back, I'm honestly relieved that I caught them when I did. If Grace hadn't been visibly pregnant, who knows how much longer they could have kept their secret. If I'd stayed in Munich for another 6 months like I originally planned, they might have had time to hide assets, make shady financial moves, or build a narrative that worked in their favor. It's become clear that Jeff and Grace assumed they had more time. My early return for Jeff's birthday caught them off guard. They weren't ready for confrontation or damage control. That surprise visit stripped away any chance they had of spinning the situation. My parents have also been helping me go through all our financial documents and joint accounts. We found charges on the shared credit card, prenatal vitamins, maternity clothes, baby supplies. All for Grace. That alone helps prove Jeff was spending our marital funds on his affair partner, which strengthens my case even more. I'm filing for divorce this week and requesting temporary orders from the court to freeze our joint accounts and prevent Jeff from making any big financial decisions while the divorce is in progress. I haven't heard a single word from Grace since the day I walked in on them. But yesterday, my mom got a call from Grace's mother. Apparently, Grace's parents are completely ashamed of what she did. Her mom apologized for her daughter's actions and told us they won't be offering any financial support during the pregnancy or after the baby's born. That honestly stunned me. I never thought I'd hear that from them. It's crazy how much can change in just 2 weeks. I went from thinking I had a strong marriage and a best friend I could always count on to cutting ties with 2 people who shattered my trust. But even with all the chaos, I'm beginning to feel hopeful. I know I'm better off without anyone who could betray me like that and expect me to smile through it. Update 2. Yesterday, I officially filed for divorce and I quit my job in Munich. The past 10 days have been intense, filled with legal steps, big decisions, and emotional whiplash. But for the first time in a while, I feel like I've taken back control of my life. My attorney filed the petition along with a request for temporary court orders to protect my finances while everything gets sorted. We're asking for a fair division of marital property, but we're also including a claim to be reimbursed for all the money I put toward Jeff's medical bills and household expenses while he was cheating with Grace. The temporary orders also include a freeze. Jeff can't rack up any new debt in my name or touch our shared accounts without permission. My lawyer told me this is pretty standard in divorce cases involving infidelity. It helps stop the cheating spouse from draining assets or stashing money before the final split. A couple of days ago, Jeff's parents actually came to my parents' house wanting to talk things out. At first, they tiptoed around the issue, suggesting Jeff and Grace's relationship was just a temporary lapse, a result of stress, loneliness, and poor judgment. His mom even said that if I just moved back and worked on the marriage, Jeff would realize his feelings for Grace weren't real and things could go back to normal. I calmly told them that I had no interest in fixing a marriage that had already been destroyed by lies and betrayal, and definitely not with someone who thought I should fund his new family. That's when Jeff's dad dropped the friendly act. He admitted they were mainly worried about how Jeff would afford his treatments without my income and insurance. Then came the real kicker. They asked if I'd consider delaying the divorce or working out a transition arrangement where I'd keep helping Jeff financially until they figured something out. His mom even went so far as to say that Jeff should be forced to cut ties with Grace, and that Grace should consider terminating the pregnancy so Jeff and I could rebuild what we had. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told them flat out that their suggestions were outrageous. I'm not going to sacrifice my own life just to make things easier for a man who broke every vow we made. His father got angry at that point. He accused me of being selfish, saying I clearly never loved Jeff if I could walk away when he needed me most. But the truth is, Jeff stopped caring about what I needed a long time ago. I reminded Jeff's parents, as calmly as I could, that I had spent the last year and a half in another country, working insane hours and sending most of my paycheck home, specifically to keep Jeff alive, while he was building a relationship with another woman behind my back. And I didn't forget to mention that, during all that time, they never once offered to help cover his medical expenses. They left after that conversation, but not before his mom threw in one final plea. She said she hoped I'd rethink my decision because, in her words, they didn't know how Jeff would survive without my financial help. Not a word about how I felt or the betrayal I'd endured, just pure panic about losing the income one was providing. It was painfully clear that their concern wasn't about my emotional well-being. It was all about money and keeping Jeff's treatment funded. Grace's parents, on the other hand, handled things in a completely different way. They reached out to me directly to say how sorry they were for what their daughter had done. Her mom told me that they were cutting her off entirely, no more college tuition, no rent money, nothing. They said they were ashamed of her choices and couldn't believe she would throw away a friendship that had lasted more than 2 decades. Her dad told me outright that they raised Grace with better values than this, and that they were disappointed she chose to wreck a marriage and a friendship for some relationship that, frankly, might not even last. They also said they had no plans to financially support the baby once it's born because of how the whole situation came about. That call meant more to me than they probably realize. Meanwhile, the consequences for Jeff and Grace are already piling up. Without my income, Jeff can't afford the full treatment plan anymore, and he's been forced to switch to a cheaper, less effective medication. Grace has been trying to find a job, but with no recent work experience, no skills, and being visibly pregnant, it hasn't been going well. My lawyer told me to expect that Jeff might try to file for spousal support, but she's not too concerned. She's confident we can fight it and win based on the adultery and the fact that he was spending marital funds on Grace throughout their affair. That spending alone is going to weigh heavily in our favor when it comes time to split the property. I'm starting my new job in Chicago next week, and I found a small but cozy apartment near the office that I can afford comfortably on my own. It's such a relief to finally be making plans for my life instead of constantly bending over backward for someone else's needs, especially when that someone turned out to be so selfish. The hardest part of all this has been coming to terms with the fact that the version of Jeff I believed in, the person I thought I married, was just that, a version. A fantasy. The real Jeff was perfectly fine using my love and sense of responsibility to string me along while building something new with Grace. And as for Grace, the woman I once called my best friend would never have done what she did. I don't think I'll ever fully understand how she justified it to herself. But I'm starting to see that I'm lucky to have learned the truth now, before I wasted more time and energy on people who were clearly comfortable exploiting my loyalty. I'm finally letting go of the guilt and resentment and focusing on building a new life, one where I don't have to wonder if the people around me are using me. Update 3. A month ago, Jeff agreed to the divorce terms and signed the paperwork. So now we're just waiting out the mandatory 60-day period before it becomes final. Honestly, I'm still shocked that he didn't put up more of a fight. He didn't contest the division of property, and he never even filed for support. According to my lawyer, he probably realized he didn't have much legal ground to stand on given the circumstances. Jeff had been asking for an in-person meeting to talk things over, but I shut that down immediately. I told him, through our attorneys, that if he had anything to say, he could say it through legal channels. There was absolutely no reason for us to have another personal conversation. But yesterday, he showed up anyway. I was at my parents' house, sitting in the backyard reading, when I heard someone calling my name. I walked around to the front, and there he was, standing in the yard, calling for me like nothing had happened. My parents weren't home, so it was just me and him. He started spouting off apologies and telling me he knew he'd made some mistakes, but he still believed our marriage could be saved if I was willing to put in the effort. Then he said something that made my blood boil. He told me that I was the reason he and Grace ended up together. That my absence had created an emotional vacuum, and they had no choice but to lean on each other. According to him, if I had been a better wife, if I'd stayed home and taken care of him, none of this would have happened. He said that by prioritizing my career, I'd basically opened the door to their relationship. So, in his eyes, I was partially to blame. That's when I completely lost it. I marched right out to the lawn and told him that the only reason I took the job in Munich was to pay for his medications and literally keep him alive. I said that trying to twist that into an excuse for cheating on me was not only manipulative, but also pathetic. I reminded him that Grace was supposed to be my best friend, not his backup wife, and that both of them had taken advantage of my trust while I was sacrificing everything for his well-being. Jeff kept cutting me off, trying to defend himself. He said I didn't understand how lonely it had been for him, and that Grace had filled a void I couldn't because I wasn't there. He kept saying their relationship just happened because they spent so much time together. I told him plenty of couples manage long-distance marriages without sleeping with their spouse's best friend, and that what he did wasn't some accident or emotional fallout. It was calculated, selfish betrayal. Then I pointed out the most infuriating part. They were fully planning to keep their little setup going, me paying the bills, them playing house, until I came home and ruined it. They weren't remorseful. They were just mad they got caught. When he started going on again about how I was being unreasonable and should understand because of his illness, I snapped. I slapped him hard and told him to get off my parents' property and never show up again unless it was strictly for legal reasons. The look on his face when I hit him was pure disbelief. Jeff didn't say another word after I slapped him. He just turned around, got in his car, and drove off. The second he left, I called my lawyer to fill her in. I wanted to be sure that him showing up uninvited at my parents' place wouldn't somehow mess with the divorce proceedings. She told me not to worry. In fact, she said his behavior might actually help my case if he keeps trying to reach out directly instead of going through his attorney. It shows he's ignoring boundaries and not following proper legal protocol. When my parents got home about an hour later, I told them what had happened. My dad was visibly frustrated. He said he wished he'd been there so he could have kicked Jeff off the property the moment he arrived. My mom was more concerned. She worried Jeff might try to come back again. So, we've decided to install security cameras around the house and won't hesitate to call the police if he ever shows up unannounced again. I don't normally condone violence, and I know slapping someone isn't exactly the ideal way to handle conflict. But honestly, I don't regret it. After everything he's done, betraying me, draining my finances, and then having the audacity to blame me for his affair, it felt like the only real response in the moment. He manipulated my love and used my support to live comfortably while cheating with someone I considered family. And somehow, in his mind, I was the problem? No. That slap came from every ounce of bottled-up rage and heartbreak I'd been carrying for months. The mandatory 60-day waiting period should be over by the end of next month. Once it's finalized, I'll officially be divorced and free. No more legal ties to Jeff, no more financial obligation, no more guilt. I've already started mapping out what my life will look like moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, I'm actually excited about the future. Update 4. The 60 days are almost up, and next week, it becomes official. Jeff and I will be divorced. I've been getting settled in Chicago, and honestly, despite everything that happened, I'm happy with where I've landed. Things are finally starting to fall into place. Yesterday, I heard from a mutual friend that Jeff and Grace broke up about 2 weeks ago. Apparently, they couldn't handle the financial strain without my support or help from their families. They were constantly fighting over money and arguing about their future. Grace is still pregnant and decided to keep the baby, but she's moved back in with her parents, who, despite their disappointment, have agreed to help her through the pregnancy. Then, out of nowhere, Jeff sent me an email. And it was unreal. He blamed me for breaking up his family. According to him, my decision to divorce meant Grace would now be raising their child alone, and somehow that was my fault. He said that if I had just been more understanding about their relationship and agreed to work out some financial deal to keep his treatments going, they could have stayed together and raised the baby in a stable home. But it didn't stop there. He actually included a full paragraph ranting about gender double standards. He said it was unfair that no one cared I slapped him, but if the roles had been reversed, people would be demanding his arrest. He wrote that just because he made an emotional mistake with Grace, people were treating him like a villain, while I got to walk away consequence-free. I didn't respond. There's no point. His email wasn't about closure or accountability. It was another attempt to manipulate me into feeling guilty for decisions that he and Grace made, fully aware of the consequences. The fact that their relationship fell apart the second the money ran dry just proves what I already knew: it was never about love. It was about convenience and comfort, and once that disappeared, so did their bond. As for me, things are finally looking up. My job in Chicago is going great, and I've started to build a social life again. My coworkers are fun, the work is challenging in a good way, and I feel like myself for the first time in years. It's such a relief not to be constantly worrying about health insurance deadlines or how to stretch my paycheck across 2 continents. Now that I'm no longer sending most of my income to someone who used me, I'm able to focus on my own goals, for once. I'm saving for things I care about. I'm exploring the city, making friends, and reclaiming the parts of myself that got buried under stress, responsibility, and betrayal. In just a few days, the divorce will be finalized, and that chapter will finally be closed. I gave so much of myself for people who didn't deserve it, but now, I'm living for me. And it feels damn good.